All right, so the recording is started. And again, just for recording's sake, this is the DupeBlocker general training session. Today we're going to go over, DupeBlocker in its entirety. We're going to talk about the different tabs you're seeing here, the DupeBlocker today, the scenarios, the warnings, the settings, and then any reports that are also in there. We're going to talk about dedupe best practices in finding duplicates. And then, of course, we'll answer whatever questions your brilliant minds come up with as we go through the session. A couple things I want to say off the bat, just to make sure everybody's in the right spot. Number one, DupeBlocker is an application that sits inside of Salesforce. So if you are used to our other applications that are standalone pieces of software, this one is different. So this is the one that you will log into Salesforce and see DupeBlocker in your app dropdown. DupeBlocker has been designed with the intention of finding duplicates in real time. So that's whether a record is being created or an existing record is being edited. It will not go out into your database and sweep it looking for duplicates that are already there. That's just not the job of DupeBlocker. That's the job of the single table dedupe in our other product, demand tools. Okay, so DupeBlocker is going to catch the new duplicates that are coming in once you've deployed the scenarios in the application. If you want to clean up your existing chaos that we all have, you're going to want to turn to demand tools for that. The other thing that I want to point out is that DupeBlocker was designed to work with data that enters Salesforce one record per API call. Okay, I should say enters or is edited in Salesforce one record per API call. So in other words, let's say you're using the data loader or Mass Effect and you're pushing in 200 records and your batch size for that product is set to 100. DupeBlocker will key those records, and don't worry if you don't know what that means, we're going to talk about that, but it will not actively search for duplicates. It does not look at data that comes in batch for that purpose, or in other words, data that comes in more than one record per API call. All right, so I don't see any questions coming in off of that, so perhaps I haven't seen anybody jump off the call. So hopefully we're all in the right spot here. Okay, so as you can see, once again, I've logged into Salesforce. I'm in my DupeBlocker application, and these are the tabs that I have set up by default. You are seeing here the version that I'm running, which is old. We have a newer version out, and I'm being told that I need to upgrade. I didn't upgrade just because I wanted you to see this message. Upgrades are free all the time. Some of the enhancements, well, not enhancements, but upgrades or versions, we will push to you. Some of them require a download. So this one obviously requires that I take some action. If you are on an older version and you see a newer version's available and maybe you don't have this upgrade message, or maybe you're upgrading from DupeBlocker 2 to DupeBlocker 3, you will go to the App Exchange or our website to grab the new version, okay? And we do have installation instructions and upgrade instructions available to you, which I can show you how to get them from here. Of course, if you haven't installed it yet, that's not going to help you. But for those of you who are just looking for general help docs, you already have this installed. The self-help is going to provide that for you, this online help. Okay, now this online help is accessible from outside of the tool, which you can see we're in a different browser and it has its own URL. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it in the chat area. There we go. So if anybody needs that link, and you'll see install and upgrade, and there's different subfolders depending on what you have to do. Up at the top here, it does give you some general information. So when you're set to expire, how many licensed users are in here, and if your account is valid. If you've just upgraded, or maybe you have just renewed your license and this is showing what you think is old information, click the update button, and that's going to go out to our auth server and check for any changes that we might have made. We get the question a lot too that under setup and install packages, you can see DupeBlocker and it has this stuff in it. This does not expire. That's not where you're going to look for your information about your license or if it's expired or not. That's not where we publish that. It is on the DupeBlocker Today tab where I just showed you. Okay, and we'll touch on this, but what you're seeing here is the active scenario rules. You're allowed 40 rules per object. Okay, there is a way to bypass that, but again, it's at your own risk. So if you wanted a solution on how to do that, it is available, or you can ask me and I can send it to you. We will go into what scenario rules are in more detail, but I just wanted you to know what that is. Okay, so not really off topic, the question that's coming in, and that's fine that you're asking it. They want to know if DupeBlocker is available for free to nonprofits. Yes. If you qualify for the 501c3 grant program, then all of our applications can be free for you. But that also does not include technical support. You can come to any of our trainings, of course. You can use our self-help and search the knowledge base. You just can't log a case with one of us to get any sort of interaction that way. So somebody's asking, how do I know what is part of the new upgrade? You're currently on the same version as I am. I can get the change doc for you and send you information on that. I don't think we have it published anywhere, that says between this version and this version, here are the differences. That would just be too tedious because we do a lot of point releases for different bug fixes. This one's a pretty big jump though, so if you want that information, I would just ask if you would please log a case and I can send that to you. Great. I don't know whose it is, but I see a hand just popped up there. Maybe they put it down. So if anybody joined a little bit late, just want to reiterate, if you have questions, type them into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. And I'll, like I'm doing now, read them back and then give the answer. All right, let's work our way through this page here. So we have the self-help, we have the live training, which you've either seen here or on our website, and then the technical support if you qualify for it. So this is the one situation where you don't have to qualify for tech support. If you want a recorded webinar of any sort, you can always log a case and we'd be happy to provide you the link. We never like to keep our training stuff private. We want everybody to have access to it. So I would urge you to use this tool to log the case or go out to our website and log the case and get to this page, just because it asks you for some pertinent information that you may not think to give to us, and it can save a couple emails back and forth and close out your case a little bit sooner. But if all you have accessible to you at the point in time when you need to log the case is email, then you can certainly email support@crmfusion.com. And then lastly, at the bottom, we have our latest tweets. We also have the links on how to stay in touch with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel. Okay, so once again, DupeBlocker is a tool that sits inside of Salesforce. It is an Aloha app, and it's designed to catch duplicates in real time. So whether that be somebody entering a record in your Salesforce instance, or maybe a web-to-lead integration where a record is coming in, or another integration point where data is modified or created in your Salesforce database. What drives DupeBlocker are the scenarios. I'm going to flip over to the scenario tab, and we're going to talk about this in more detail. I'm going to flip to a few different tabs before we do that. So while DupeBlocker may be installed in your org and it may be deployed as an application, it won't do anything unless the scenarios are deployed. And that's where we're going to spend most of our time today, is talking about the scenarios. So we're going to come back to this. But The nice thing about the DupeBlocker scenarios is that they are completely customizable, and we do encourage our end users to customize them to fit their specific business process. We will all define a duplicate differently, and we will all most likely handle that differently. So this is made to accommodate all those different possibilities. I'm going to flip over to the DupeBlocker settings tab just for a moment, and we're going to talk a little bit about just some of the setup stuff that's in here, and then we'll go back to the scenarios. So the settings tab, you want to come here if this is a fresh install and just take a look, see what we have in here. Okay, you have your same information that we found on the Today page up top that I'm highlighting. You also have an administrator email, and this email address is important because if any error messages, occur that we can't render to you in the UI, they will be emailed to that address. So it's important that whatever address that is, it be a monitored email box by somebody who is responsible for the well-being of DupeBlocker. And it can change over time. So you're not just stuck with just, having that one there. This is another tab that while we're discussing our scenarios, we will be referencing a little bit. But I wanted to just point this key piece out and to come into this DupeBlocker settings tab before you start doing anything else. I think you saw before, but I'll go back there again. Under Setup in your installed packages, it shows you what version you're running, shows you on the Today page also. But it's just in the normal installed packages area. And then, of course, under Create and Objects, you're going to see the different objects that are related to DupeBlocker. Okay, so a lot of times people get a little worried about how they're going to administer permissions and things like that. DupeBlocker is like any other custom object even you could build. It just has some cool triggers and such in the background that are doing its job. So when we talk about access and security and things like that to the DupeBlocker app, that is all handled at the profile level. And if you're doing an upgrade or if you're doing a fresh install, I do suggest that you follow the security portion closely when you're installing it because it will save you a lot of time. Okay, so back at the Scenarios tab, we have a list here. I'm in my All view, and this is all of the scenarios that came with the tool and any of the scenarios that maybe I modified or created as new. You will have pre-built scenarios, and they're great jumping off points. If you're not even sure where to start, these are a good place. You can use them as they are. You can modify them, or you can just build your own from scratch. It's entirely up to you. DupeBlocker does work with accounts, contacts, leads. It will also do lead to contact deduping and lead to account. It can be enabled for the use with a custom object or a non-standard object like opportunities. So what I'm going to do is let's look at this scenario here, this account scenario that I have deployed. And we're just going to talk through what all of these fields mean, what they do, what the scenario rules mean, and the different mapping types and then filters. And we're just going to kind of go into all the fun detail of what this has to offer. When I put this in edit mode, we have access to a scenario name field, which is freeform text. Call it whatever you want. But the scenario type, you'll notice, is locked down because I've already saved the scenario, so it's already committed to being an account scenario. If I were to create a new one, that scenario type would be a drop-down to show me all of the enabled objects. The first top 5, those are enabled by default. You don't have to do anything to have those show up. Anything below that, where it says non-standard, those you do have to enable for use. Okay. To do that, you're going to go over to the Settings tab. And on the left, you have Enable Objects. So I click that, and you have a list of all your custom objects. And you can see the ones down here that I've enabled, and of course you have the Disable link. And it's really very simple. You just click on the object, click Enable, You do, I believe, have to have the author Apex permission on your profile to do this. Okay, so there it is showing as enabled. And if I go back here and refresh, it will now show as an option in my dropdown. Okay, so we're back in our pre-built scenario here. I flip tabs. And the owner of the scenario is going to be whoever installed the package, or if it's a new scenario, whoever created it. But of course, you can change that. Then we have the match on insert and match on update action. These are asking you, what would you like the scenario to do if it finds records as duplicates? And this is, what do you want it to do when a record is created? The next one is, what do you want to do when a record is edited or modified? You're going to have slightly different options between the two. Mostly they'll be the same, but there's a couple in the insert that you don't have on the update. So you have do not insert, and we're just going to talk about this right now at a very high level, and I'm going to show you examples of what they look like so you know what your end users will experience based on the settings that you choose. So do not insert and redirect to existing are what we consider our blocking actions. If it finds the record that you're creating to be a duplicate of another existing record or set of records, it will not allow for that record to be created. Report duplicate allows for the duplicate to be created and saved in Salesforce, but then we create a warning record that tells you, here's this scenario that found a dupe based on either insert or update, and then here are the records that are duplicates. And again, we're going to show those. But I want you to keep in mind that reporting the duplicate and warnings go hand in hand. You don't get a warning unless the dupe was reported. Do nothing. So sometimes people don't want this to work with stuff that's being created. They just want it to work with the stuff that's being modified. So you can choose do nothing for that action. The auto merge is kind of self-explanatory. So it takes the record that is coming in, and if it's a duplicate of an existing record, it will merge the new incoming record into the existing record. The next two options we're not really going to go over because they're more advanced options for those of us that have coding prowess, which I do not. The redirect to Visualforce page is a little bit of an exception, though. We have a solution article on how to work with this, and frankly, if I can do it without any coding capabilities, I'm pretty sure anybody on the call can. But the redirect to Visualforce page, again, is a blocking action. It just is making this redirect option more customizable. And we'll talk about what the differences are when we do the examples. The custom Apex code gives you the ability to use our matching API and call in your custom code. We do not write custom code, nor will we troubleshoot your custom code to see if it's, coded properly. For the update action, you'll have do not update, which is a blocking action. It blocks the update from being saved. Report duplicate, do nothing, and the custom Apex code. Now this is a Visualforce page, and when you make certain selections, the page will change and certain options will show or go away. The match on insert action that I'm choosing right now is do not insert. And when that happens, I have to provide an error message that gets shown to the end user as to why they're not allowed to enter this duplicate. Freeform text, you can put in there whatever you want. My only advice would be try not to get too granular with what field you're matching on, because your end users will more than likely become hip to this and figure out ways to bypass being caught as a duplicate. So I'm not trying to say be too vague either, just keep some things a mystery. So the error message is required if you have do not insert selected or do not update. Okay, the error message applies for both. If I change this to redirect to existing, I still have the error message on here, but only because of my do not update. If I moved that to report, it would go away. On the report duplicate, though, if you have one of these set to that, you have this option asking if you would like to create a task for the warning. So the way we report the duplicate, again, is through a warning record. And it's asking, would you like a task sent to somebody to let them know that that warning record is out there? You can say no, or you can say yes, send it to the current user. And when we use the term current user, we're referring to the person responsible for creating the duplicate record, whether that be with the creation of a new record or the edit of an existing record. Scenario owner is whoever owns the scenario, so whoever's listed here, or you can send it to both. The max block shown and this one here, the allow block bypassing, I'm not even going to discuss those until we start showing them, just because I think it's much easier. Okay, deployed. So if you don't have this checked, it is in development. It's not going to work. If you have it checked, that's part of getting it to work. So there's a little bit of a path you have to take here to make sure that your scenarios not only are deployed, but that they're functioning the way they should. So if you want it to be able to find and capture duplicates, you have to have it deployed. The bypass security is saying that we're going to allow DupeBlocker to not have to abide by your security as far as who gets to see which records. This is only for data comparison purposes, okay? So let's say user A and user B are not allowed to see each other's records in Salesforce, but you still don't want user A and user B creating dupes of each other's data. If you turn on bypass security, user A and user B still have the same access as stipulated by their profile, but DupeBlocker can say, all right, I'm exempt from those rules, so I can still compare the data between these two users if I need to find duplicates. Still, like I said, does not extend any permissions to the end user. Okay, it's just for data comparison. Dual filters, that's another thing I'm not going to talk about until we are down to that section. Person accounts. This will work, well, DupeBlocker will work with business accounts and person accounts. The default behavior is business accounts. Right now, the scenario that we're looking at is for a business account. If I were to turn on person account, now it is just a person account scenario. It will never be both. It's one or the other. If you have both business accounts and person accounts in your Salesforce database, you will have to have two separate sets of scenarios. One set up for the person account with this checked, and other set up for business accounts without this checked. The rebuild needed, it's another thing we're going to circle back to because there's more explanation that has to happen before I think that can make sense. And guys, you don't have to wait for me to ask if there's questions. If something comes to you, feel free to type it in. If it's not relevant for the topic that we're discussing, I'll table it to a better time. Okay, so moving down, we have the scenario rules. The scenario rules are what you are using to tell DupeBlocker what fields have to match between two or more records in order for them to be seen as a duplicate. In this situation, the fields account name, street, city, postcode, and phone all have to match in order for records to be considered duplicates. These are ANDed to each other. There is no ORing, so we can't say account name, street, city, or account name, street, city, postcode, and phone. The ORing happens by having multiple scenarios. If I had two account scenarios set up and they were matching on different fields, when I create or edit an account, both of those scenarios are tripped. So they function simultaneously, and it is possible that both of them catch the record as a duplicate, either to the same or different records in Salesforce. And there is a hierarchy of which scenario will win. Okay, and we'll get into that. But if you want to say, you know, this set of fields or this set of fields, you have to have multiple scenarios set up to do that. Another important thing about how we match data is that when we select a field to match on, it is also saying that this field has to be populated with a value in order for DupeBlocker to be able to analyze it. In other words, if there is a record coming in and it doesn't have a city filled out, this scenario will not evaluate that data because it's specifically saying city has to be evaluated and populated. So we match populated fields to populated fields. You can broaden your reach a little bit by turning on match blank. You're going to find that checkbox if you edit or create a rule. It's over here. And you can see in the little help bubble, blank fields are not matched against each other by default. If this option is checked, though, blank fields can be compared and matched to other blank fields for that field that it's enabled on. Okay, so it's always populated to populated, and if enabled blank to blank, it will never be blank to populated. If you have an account in Salesforce and it has name, street, city, postcode, and phone filled out, and then a new account is being created and it comes in, it has the same name, same street, doesn't have a city, same postcode, same phone, we will not find that duplicate with this scenario because we're matching on city and we're saying right now that it has to be populated on both records. And on the one that's coming in, it's not. Okay, or if we had match blank turned on, it'd have to be blanked on both records. In this situation, though, city was populated on one, blank on the other. We can't do that matching, which is another reason, well, not that we can't, we don't do that matching because we want you to understand what data is actually being matched. Okay, and that means the values are the same or blank. Not one is blank, one is a value. Sorry, someone's asking if it will work in a sandbox. Yeah, for sure. If you have a sandbox, absolutely download this into your sandbox and play with it there. You know, figure it all out, work out the kinks, and then you can take the settings from your sandbox, if it's full copy, and put it into production without having to rebuild. So in your settings tab, you have an export settings, and then you can import them into production. Okay. So someone's asking, you know, sorry if this is Salesforce 101, but what's the difference between business and person accounts? Person account is basically a mashup between an account and contact. It houses all the details of the person. It's more of a B2C business model. There you go. Whereas business accounts is B2B. So you have accounts with just the company detail, and then you have contacts with the people information. Now you're using a nonprofit service pack, so person accounts don't come into play there. We use the older individual account method, not one-to-one or household. Okay, yeah, so if you'd be using business accounts. Okay, let's go back to our scenario. So hopefully you guys have a good understanding of how we match data. Now what we need to do is tell the system, you know, exactly how the field level data should be matched. Not everything has to be exact. That would sort of defeat the purpose. So we have these different matching algorithms that you can employ to find records in their data and that have similarities. We have a lot of different mapping types. I'm going to discuss the most commonly used ones today because inundating you with that detail, number one, it's not going to stick because we're going to go over a lot of stuff. And number two, we also in our help docs have them defined under mapping types. You could even search here, mapping types, and it gives you all the definitions. That's where we're going to go now. Now, if I click Edit, you can see that you choose your field to match on, you choose your mapping type, and any of the engines or match blank options that are applicable. The mapping type that we're using here is clean account name. And the reason I like this one, and it's kind of my go-to when I'm getting started, is because it's customizable. And the customization for this is found under your DupeBlocker settings tab, on the left-hand side, clean account name settings. When that mapping type is selected, it references the replace list, the prefix, and the suffix list. Now, when I say replace or it says remove, I don't actually mean we're changing any of your data, because we're not. We're simply just changing how that data is analyzed. The replace tab looks anywhere in the string of the value. If you have a hyphen or a period, comma, it's going to ignore it, see it as a blank value. Ampersands and plus signs are seen synonymous to the word and you can also do word abbreviation substitutions. The word saint is being parsed down and also seen as ST. For example, records called St. Jude's Hospital and another called St. Jude's Hospital are able to be matched if using the clean account name, because I have Saint and ST. Johnson ampersand Johnson can be matched to Johnson and Johnson, but the record values still remain the same. And of course, you can add to this, which we definitely encourage modifying this based on language, locale, and business industry. Then we go over and do a prefix and suffix removal. If a record is called the CRM Fusion Incorporated, but the duplicate coming in is just called CRM Fusion, we're able to see those as duplicates at that field name level because we're ignoring the prefix of the, we're ignoring our suffix of incorporated, and whatever else is listed here. And they're all being parsed down and seen as just CRM Fusion. These tabs are not case sensitive, but do not use punctuation when working with the words. So somebody just asked, case sensitive? Nope. And they don't have to be like right next to each other like this, right? You don't have to have co and company, and they could be just scattered throughout. We just happen to do that because it's easy to see which ones you have if you have the related ones next to each other. In addition to the mapping type, we also have these engines to the right that can be used to help loosen up the mapping type. The English fuzzy, a lot of people will say, oh, I did a fuzzy match, and they really don't have any basis for what that means, except for in our tool, we have a very specific definition, and fuzzy is a metaphone, or a phonetic match. What we do is remove the vowels from the word, and then analyze how the consonants sound when the word's pronounced. It also ignores numbers and spaces. So phonetically, Hewlett-Packard 15 matches to one called Howlett-Pickard 26. We're ignoring the numbers, so 15 and 26 automatically don't matter. And then phonetically, Hewlett-Packard and Howlett-Pickard sound the same once you get rid of the vowels. The Alpha Clean engine only looks at English alphabet letters A through Z and numbers 0 through 9. It ignores all foreign characters and punctuation, which is good to know because you don't have to go into your clean account name settings and exhaustively put every punctuation to be ignored as a blank. And then the transpose engine says that the order of the words is irrelevant as long as the words are exactly the same. A record called Salesforce Foundation and one called Foundation Salesforce can still match. Same words, different order. Moving down in the list here, we have street address match, and built into that, it will ignore the road indicator. 123 Main, 123 Main Street, 123 Main Boulevard can all be seen as the same. It also will see things like N in North, W in West, the number and the spelled out variation, so 1 and ONE will match, first and 1 ST, and so on. That one is not customizable, it is just the way it is. We have a relaxed version of this that you can use if that's still too rigid. Exact is 100% exact, spelling, spacing, and punctuation. So you can turn on some of these to help loosen that up. Zip 5 and 9, that allows for a 5-digit numeric postcode to match with its 9-digit counterpart. Pretty US-centric, but it will not corrupt alphanumeric matches. It just reverts to exact at that point. And then the numeric mapping type will, by default, ignore parentheses, hyphens, and alpha characters. So as long as the numbers are in the same order, they can be seen as a match. Another best practice that I want to talk about while we're here is, you see how we say, like, this one's rigid? Let me go back to the list here. We have rigid, semi-rigid, loose, very loose. We've got these naming conventions for our scenarios. And that's because we do recommend, number one, to have multiple scenarios per object, and number two, for those scenarios to go rigid to loose. So even though the scenarios run simultaneously when a record is created or edited, you want to have a variety between how data is compared. Your rigid scenario should find the really exact duplicates. Okay, and I don't want to say the word exact, very similar duplicates. This is where the duplicates that are caught here, you have a very high confidence level because they're matching on a bunch of different fields. And then you can have more of an action that is blocking or an auto merge. Whereas the looser you go, you may want to report the duplicate because maybe a false positive is caught as a match. Whatever action you decide to take, the main point that I want you to take away from this is that you should have multiple scenarios for objects, and they should run the gamut of rigid to loose. And that might come in 3 scenarios, it might come in 2 or 10, it just depends on your data. Right now, this scenario is working for all accounts that match on these fields and have these fields populated. If I wanted to, though, I could tell the system that certain scenarios should only work for certain people or should only work for certain data, and I do that with the use of filters. The DupeBlocker scenario filters, which I've turned off some of my buttons. Hang on. I got to go turn my buttons back on here. You should see a new filter button here, but I was messing with my permissions and clearly did not turn them back on correctly. While that's doing that, I'm going to see if I just can't do it in my profile settings. Turn off that permission too. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. Wow, I really messed up all my privileges in here. So you can see on my profile here, I have all of these different settings for DupeBlocker, just like you would any other object. So they're going to show up as custom object permissions. You're also going to see different visual force pages and different Apex classes. And these should be enabled by default if you follow the instructions when you're doing the either the insert or the upgrade. But you can see there's a lot of different things you have to do and a lot of places to go, especially field level stuff. So if you've done a fresh install and you didn't follow the security stuff, it may be easier for you if you haven't done a whole lot of customizations to just uninstall and reinstall following the guide. Oh, goodness, guys, I apologize for this. Let me go into a different org so you can see the button I'm talking about here. And we'll talk about filters there. I'm not actually going to use them in my example because my data isn't, it's just dummy data. The question out there right now is DupeBlocker Lightning compatible? Not at the moment. And I don't know if development is going to do support for that. All right, so let's get down into the filter area. And again, I'm just in a different org at the moment where you can actually see the buttons. Not that you probably couldn't figure out what the buttons look like. I just want to be clear on a few things with this. Okay, so here you can see the new button. Zoom in on that a little bit. And we have a filter on this scenario and this other org. And the way this filter reads right now is that we're only looking at accounts where the account name equals date test. The way these filters work with this setting is that this is saying, okay, only look at new incoming data where the account name is this, and then only compare it against existing data where the account name is this. So it's a filter for both the incoming and the existing data, okay? And this is what we call an object filter. And if I click edit, you'll see that we have two different types. The object-based filter, which you can see as object because we've chosen the object, deals with the data itself on the object. You also have a current user filter. So remember in the beginning I said current user is the person creating or editing the record. A lot of times people will use these to say, you know, I'm testing this. I don't want it to involve my other users yet. I don't have a sandbox. I'm testing in production. How do I do that? You can tell the system that these scenarios should only work if the profile is system administrator, okay? Or you can specify by person. So you can search for people here. Oh, wrong org. Let's see. Okay, and because we're looking for the ID, we don't expect you to paste it in. You can search by the name and then click add. And now I have two filters on here. Actually, no, I modified that one. So the one that I modified went away. This filter is just for the person, okay? It has nothing to do with the data. So it works a little bit differently. It's just saying only evaluate data with this scenario if the person creating or editing is Olivia. Okay, so if Kelly were to log in and do something, this scenario is not going to look at her stuff because of this filter. So just to recap, there's two filters: object-based, which is whatever object the scenario is set to, and user-based. The way the scenarios are right here, the object-based is filtering the incoming data as well as the existing data in Salesforce. They both have to meet that criteria. That's kind of limiting, and maybe you want to filter your incoming data differently than the data that it's compared against, and you can do that. And you do that with the use of dual filters. Once I turn on my dual filter checkbox, I now have two filter areas here. The current user filters are still going to work the same. Okay, the dual filters apply just for object-based. So let's say that my new incoming data, I only want this scenario to look at account records that we could do record type, we could do created by, we'll do record type equals customer. But I only want those compared against stuff in my database where the record type is actually prospect. I want to see if we have any customers that exist out there with prospect data. So in my target filter, that's where I make that stipulation. So the target filter is the data that's in Salesforce. Okay, so let's look at this again. The top filter here, where my mouse is, says only look at new incoming data or data being edited if the record type ID equals customer, and then only compare that data to other records in the system where the record ID is prospect. So new incoming data, existing data. And only applicable for object-based filters. Dual filters are not necessary with current user, but just because they function differently. I realize I had to flip orgs to do that, so if I confuse anybody, please let me know. But you can see, you can turn off security where somebody can't create a filter. They can't create a rule, so you'll notice between this org and this org, you got some new buttons here. In my org, I don't have that. So this user can look at this stuff. I can modify what's there, but that's it. Okay. So we're almost ready to actually have this scenario deployed and doing what it should do. The first step, remember I said, was to have the application itself deployed. The second step is having the scenario deployed. I guess step 2A would be to make sure that your scenario rules and your filters are in place the way you want them. And then the third step is building your keys. So this checkbox here that I glazed over and said we'd come back to, rebuild needed. Whether you are enabling a scenario, creating a new one, maybe you made modifications to an existing scenario. If this checkbox is checked, it is an indication to you that the scenario is not functioning the way you think it should, that we need to go out and rekey the data based on the rules and the filters that you see. Okay. The reason we key data is for performance, number one, because if you had a record that was coming into Salesforce and it had to be compared to every other record that you have for that object on all of these different fields, and we had to go through all of them and look at those fields one by one, you would lose your mind because you'd never get into Salesforce. It would never happen. So what we do is we say, all right, we have these scenarios, they're in place, they're ready to go, but we have to take this step of going out to our existing data and saying, here's what you look like to this scenario. Based on the fields we're matching on, based on the filters we have in place, this is what your unique key is going to be. And that is all derived by the mapping types and the fields and the filters. And we chunk it down into a little key. So if a new record coming in has that same key, it can very quickly, without pause, show you that. So existing data has to be keyed. New data is keyed at the point of entry. Data that exists also is rekeyed when it is edited. Okay. So I have to go through this rebuild key process. And if that is checked, just remember that's your key, no pun intended, that's your indication that something has changed. You need to go out and rekey your data. You'll notice, though, that this checkbox, you can mess around with it. So do yourself a favor and don't. Just pretend that you can't touch that field. It is a system-generated field. It'll be checked when it needs to be checked. It will be unchecked when you have fulfilled the rebuild process. So just unchecking that isn't doing anything other than taking away my indicator. I'm going to talk a little bit about why or what you would do to a scenario that would make it need a rebuild, and then we'll go through what the rebuild process is. So like I said in the beginning, creating a brand new scenario, just deploying DupeBlocker, undeploying and then redeploying DupeBlocker, creating new scenarios. I think I said that. And then if you change a field that you're matching on, if you select a different mapping type, if you select a different engine, if you make a modification to a customizable mapping type, or if you add or remove an object-based filter. Those are all things that are going to force you to have to rebuild your keys. So that's why I waited to the end, because there's no point in just building keys constantly. Number one, it could take a long time. Okay, my org is going to take seconds because it's a dummy org. I use it for training. That's on purpose. There's hardly any data in here. In your org, you're actually working in it. People are using things. So there's real records that need to be keyed. And that could take an hour, 10 hours. If you have millions of records, it could take a week, okay? And I know that sounds crazy, but it's not because of a lag of us. It's just how Salesforce handles the keying process. My advice to you when you're about to do a key build is if you have more than one scenario that requires one, do them together. Doing them one by one, even though one at a time might go faster, if you do them all together, the cumulative time is going to be less. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it one by one. You certainly can, but these are just tricks of the trade here. So how do I build these keys then? You have buttons here. You have rebuild keys, which if I click that, you can see the hover help is saying for this scenario only, and it has to be deployed and have scenario rules, right? So you can't make keys for something where it doesn't have anything to derive the keys from, and you can't key records for an undeployed scenario. Keys take up storage space, so we're not going to put those out there unless the scenario is deployed. Or you have rebuild all keys, and that will rebuild keys for every single deployed scenario, even if the rebuild needed is not checked. So that is not a prerequisite to build the keys. It doesn't have to be checked. You can build the keys whenever you want. The alternative is to come to your list view. If you just want to do the ones that are checked as deployed and needing a rebuild, you can check them off here. And then do rebuild scenario keys, and it will only do for the ones that you have selected. There's two different ways of building your keys, and over in our DupeBlocker settings tab, under general settings, we're going to see those. Put this in edit mode. The key builder type by default will be the original. And this one is the faster of the two by about 50%, but you have to maintain an active internet connection. Obviously, your computer has to stay on, and you have to stay at this specific web page while it's functioning, while it's building those keys. So if I, say, yeah, let's go ahead and kick off the key build over here, open up another tab, go into that same org to do something different, Salesforce is going to invalidate the session that's building the keys. So it won't actually continue with the key build. If I wanted to work in that org while a key build is going on, I would have to open it up in a different browser and do whatever I need to there, okay? But you can't do it in the same browser. The original also uses API calls to do the key build. The other option you have is the batch Apex. So one more time, 50% slower than the original. It does not use API calls, which is kind of good because if you are coming up against your API call limit for the day, that could really be a hindrance. And you don't have to have the computer turned on. You don't have to have an internet connection, nothing. What it does is it queues it up as an Apex job, and you'll be notified when it's completed. Okay, so I'm going to show you what each of those look like. We'll start with the original. And I will say rebuild scenario keys. It's going to jump me to this page, and you can see, don't leave it until it's done or it'll be interrupted. To wait 6 seconds, I think I can handle that. And when it's done, it gives you this pop-up. And when I go back to my scenario, you can see that the rebuild needed from my account scenario is unchecked now. And if I look into that scenario, the last key build date and time has been updated. And we're unchecked, okay? So pretty easy. Now again, in your orgs, how long is this going to take will depend on what you use. And I'm going to show you how to figure out ballpark how long it's going to take. When I use the batch, and let's say I do, let me go back to, we'll do this one, rebuild keys. So we'll just do for this one. Keys are being built in the background. You'll be emailed when it's done. It's not necessary to keep this page open. It will show under setup in your Apex jobs, batch Apex completed. Okay. If it was processing, it would say so. And you'd also, if we went to, let's go back to the scenario, you would see a little, let me do this again. There'd be a banner in front of it. There it is. So you can't start any key build process, you can't edit this. It's letting you know it's still doing its thing. But if you go to your Apex jobs, and let's say this has taken a while and you just don't want it to run anymore, you can abort it. You'll have an abort link there. I'm just not doing it quick enough for you guys to see it. There we go. Okay, so processing, but you can stop it. If we go to our help docs, on the welcome page, there is a scenario keys document. And it talks about the key stuff that we just talked about, especially at the top here. It talks about, the things that, well, okay, so first of all, the difference between the original and the batch, things that require a rebuild. And then down at the bottom, how long will this take? If we have 350,000 accounts in our Salesforce database and we have 3 account scenarios for DupeBlocker that are deployed, that's about 1 million keys that need to be created. The original builder is going to take anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. The batch is going to take double that. So if you have scenarios for accounts, contacts, leads to contact, a bunch of stuff, you have to add together the time for each object to figure out how long it'll take. All right, so this is also a good doc. I think this is in the follow-up email we sent. I haven't actually done a DupeBlocker training in a while, so I'm going to give you the link in the chat, but I'm pretty sure I put it in our follow-up email. So now our scenario is ready to use, and we can look at the different actions here. Some of these ask me, yeah, if you want a recording, go ahead and just log a case, or you can email me directly and I'll get one to you. I'm going to put my email address in, excuse me, in the chat. I'll send it to everybody. I always end up getting a hybrid of my personal and work email, so I just have to double check. There we go. And honestly, guys, I may end up sending you a recorded webinar from the previous class. It covers the same detail, but without the jumbling of the filters. So if you would prefer that, something a little bit more streamlined, where I thought I had changed my permissions and didn't, you can let me know. That'll be fine. And again, if you guys have questions, please let me know as they come to you. Let's go ahead and look at what these actions will look like to your end user. Let's see, I'm going to see name, street, city, postcode, phone. We took our filters off. Good. And we're at do not insert. So I'm going to go create an account. And actually, I have one out there. Let's see, it has a name, phone, has a street, city, and a postcode. So I'm actually, sorry, I just want to delete the junk that was down there. I am going to clone this just so you don't have to watch me type in data. But I can change some things. And if I'm changing fields that aren't being matched on, then it doesn't matter. We'll make this, instead of incorporated, we'll just call it Canine Club so you can see the clean account name working. And we'll make this street. And when I save, it should have given me a blocking. Hang on. Well, clearly this is making a liar out of me. It is not blocking my insert. It is reporting my duplicate instead, and I'm not sure why at the moment. Like I said, I have been messing in this org so much, I really think I messed something up. This is a dev org. That's what they're for, right? Let's go ahead and go into my other org, and we'll just continue in there. The settings may look a little different on the scenarios, but the idea behind them will be the same. All right, so we have some account scenarios here. Let's look at this one. And we'll make this do not insert. So this one is just name, street, city, and phone. So I'll create an account. That was not supposed to happen. Those are my tasks popping up from, if I said to give me a task from a warning, which makes me crazy. I'm not a fan of that. And I will show you how to get around that. Okay, so I just created a new record. There isn't one in this system for that record, but I'm going to clone it. God willing, this will work. There we go. This is what we should have seen in my org. You've got the error message. Now, remember I said before that the scenarios were going to function simultaneously. In this scenario, we have the potential duplicate account found with similar name, address, and phone number. Fine. But you'll notice we have that message here, but we also have another one. And it's because there was another scenario that was also set to block that found a record as a duplicate. Are these the same record? I don't know. They very well could be different. Okay. By right-clicking and opening in a new page, though, you can find that out. But the way the blocks work is they give you that error message that you put in your scenario, and then if there's however many records, it will show you the links to them. So you can't actually save this record. You have to work with one of the ones that are in there, which is why we call it a blocking action. Now, if I had, oh goodness, no, I didn't want to do that. There we go. If I had allow block bypassing turned on, I don't know why it's not letting me update. So maybe the issue wasn't my org. Maybe there's something going on in Salesforce. I don't know why it won't let me check that box. It's not a special function. It's just a checkbox. Okay, I'm done messing with that one. I apologize, guys. I was not expecting any technical difficulties today. This is the other scenario. Duplicate found with the same name, address, and phone number. Okay. I'm going to turn on the bypass block here. Okay, it already is. Good. But you'll notice we don't see bypass blocker. There's nothing that says, yeah, go ahead and create the record anyway, which is what the bypass block allows for. There's a little button that says bypass, and it creates the record. And then the default behavior when you do that is it will report the duplicate. And you'll see that in your DupeBlocker settings. So bypass block creates warnings. That default is checked. But if only one of the scenarios that caught this is set to bypass, it won't work. They all have to either allow the bypass or none. So if one or two do, but the third one doesn't, and the third one also caught this as a duplicate, then no bypass block would be possible. Okay, so even though I have it turned on for this scenario, I don't for this one, the one that won't let me edit it, to get that. Okay, yeah, so it actually did delete my record. I tried to save it, and that was the problem. Let's see if we can't just get it out of the recycle bin here. But there's another option that kind of goes along with the bypass block. It's just something that I don't really like talking about until I can show it to you, is this max blocks shown. So let's say I create a record and there are 15 other ones in my database that match what I just created. Do I really want to show my user a list of 15 different links to accounts? Or do I want to say, you know what, show them 5, give them 5 to choose from? That's what I can set here. This max blocks shown works for do not insert and redirect to existing. Because on the redirect to existing, and we'll see this in a second, if there's more than one record, it'll show in a pop-up that says, you know, here's one record we're taking you to, but here's a list of them that we also found as matches. So you can dictate how many matches are shown. Okay, now this is the only one that's showing because I had just undeleted my other scenario. Let's go to that one. And this one. So this one has the allowed block bypassing. This one does not. So it doesn't show up anymore either because it wasn't there working when I had deleted it. Where are we at? There it is. So that's why it went out of that list when I clicked save again. But you'll see I have that bypass block button now. So if I bypass it, it's just going to create this record. If I clone it again, same thing. Okay, but now this time I have 2 records. And I can keep doing this, and it's only going to ever show me as many as 5. And when I bypassed it, it created my warning. So when I go to my task, there's my warning. Okay, so this is what the warning will look like. And it tells you what scenario. So this is the scenario that caught it. And down at the bottom of the scenario, you can see all the warnings that are associated here. Okay, so the task just gives you a link to the warning. Now this is exactly what it would look like if our scenario was set to just report the duplicate. That's what reporting looks like. The record gets saved. Your end user doesn't see that bypass block, then it gets saved because there's nothing else to tell it not to. The scenario is just saying, yeah, go ahead and enter it in, and you know, they're creating it like they would any other record. They don't know anything's going on in the background. Okay, just want to make sure those are the same. And then when you go to the warning, you can either decide, are these duplicates that need to be merged, or do I just delete the warning because I actually want both of those records in Salesforce? So by deleting the warning, you're not deleting anything but the warning and this potential duplicate. You're not deleting the actual record, though, of the object. If I clicked delete here, you're still not deleting the object. You're deleting the potential duplicate record. But if I decide I want to merge them, I click that button, and I'm given the stare and compare screen, and I just pick the values that I want to keep from each. I merge the selected records. You do have to have the delete permission on the object to merge them. That's Salesforce standard permission requirement. And after you merge all the records off of a warning, the warning goes away. It gets deleted from the system. Do I have? No. All right, so let me clone this again. We'll save it. So the other place that you can see a warning, there's two ways of doing this. We have the old way, which is what I'm showing you now, the DupeBlocker potential duplicate related list. And it simply just shows you the duplicate number, the duplicate warning, and then the scenario that found it as a duplicate. So I have two scenarios that found these as duplicates, maybe to the same record, maybe not. We have a newer, more elegant way of showing you this information that actually shows you the other records that it's a duplicate of. This one, you can't see the other records until you go into the warning. So in your layout, and this is already there, you just have to add it to your layout if you want it, you can add a visual force page for the DupeBlocker inline duplicates. So the first thing we do is we add a section. And I'll just call this DupeBlocker potential dupes. And then I drag the visual force page down in there. If you just drag the visual force page in without creating a section, you won't see it, and it'll drive you batty because that's what it did to me for like a month. Of course, we put this in our help desk that you have to create a section. I just didn't read that. So now you have this list, which makes this one obsolete. And I prefer this over this because I can see whatever fields here I want. I can see the actual record. So this is a link to the record that is a duplicate of the record I am looking at. These are not. Okay. So whichever way you prefer, but I like the visual force page. You can edit the fields that are shown here. We have a solution article on how to do that. Okay, you're not going to see, you basically create your own custom visual force page, but we walk you through it. So that's one way to see the warnings. You don't have to put it on everybody's page layout, maybe just the admins, but it's just an easy way to identify if there's duplicates for this record. All right, I'm going to go back up to the redirect. And if I clone this, let's see. Okay, so this is what the redirect looked like. It tells you why you've been redirected. And if more than one dupe was found, it's up in the right-hand corner like we see here. And I can toggle through these and choose the one that I want. Once, you know, and if I click that X, I can close that little window here. If you remember, you also have a redirect to visual force page. That is going to look identical, except the redirect to visual force page allows for this potential or possible duplicate list to be modified, so you can put in what, you know, different fields that you want to see there. And that little pop-up, that gray one, that also becomes editable. You can put some custom messaging there. But it's still a blocking action. The record I just created was not saved. I was just taken to this record. One thing I want to caution you about with redirect to existing is the bypass security. If you've bypassed security and you're redirecting your end user to a page that they don't have access to view, they will get the insufficient access rates error message, okay, or some error message from Salesforce saying you don't have access to view this. All right, so just something to chew on while you're getting this set up. Auto merge, last but not least. When you choose auto merge, you also get access to the auto merge settings button. And this is where you tell the system what to do with the data at the field level. So the first part, the merge target. The record that is being created will always be merged into one of the existing records. So the new record will never be the master or the one that is saved. It's always one of the existing. If there is more than one record, though, that the new record matches to, which one should it be merged with? And you can either choose the oldest, newest, or most recently modified record. You have a merge priority. The lower the number, the higher the priority. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because, remember, again, I said these scenarios run simultaneously. And while there is a hierarchy to the action to let you know which scenario is going to be the one that's dealing with this duplicate if more than one catches it, there's also a hierarchy to the merge priority. So let's talk about this hierarchy thing for a second. The merge priority is saying, if there are more than one auto merge scenarios that catches this record as a duplicate and they have, maybe you have different settings here, which merge settings should be honored? Okay, so again, lower the number, higher the priority. But if we're talking about just two scenarios, one set to do not insert, one set to auto merge, they both catch the record as a duplicate, what's going to happen? And that is listed as a solution in our knowledge base. So if I go to our website, I have it right here. I'm going to search on order, just because I know that's in the name of it. In what order will DupeBlocker scenarios catch duplicates? And we re-explain that they're not run in order, they're run simultaneously. And here is the hierarchy of action. So in my example, one set to auto merge, one set to do not insert, the resulting action is the auto merge. If they are all set to do not insert, you saw that you would get more than one error. If they were all set to report the duplicate, you would get more than one warning. So now we have to tell the system what to do at the field level. And you have these defaults. So mergeable fields, do you want to merge the values together? Ignore, which means keep what's on the merge target. Update if blank, so update the merge target with what's on the new record only if the merge target is blank. Or overwrite, so overwrite the merge target with what's coming in. This applies for long text area, multi-select pick list, and checkbox or Boolean fields. Then you have the defaults for all the other fields, anything that's non-mergeable, phones, emails, websites, all that stuff. So you have ignore, update if blank, and overwrite. Now that's really nice at a default level, but if there's certain fields that you have exceptions for, so maybe the account description, you're like, you know what, I don't want those merged. I actually want to just overwrite. I can make that exception down here, and this trumps my default. So while all other mergeable fields will be merged, the account description will not. It'll be overwritten. You also have the ability to save the new incoming field level values in the comments section of a task. So if you need it for historical purposes or just reference purposes, you can have it put there. This is the default task subject. The default status is not started. I prefer to put mine in as completed so they go in the activity history so nobody has to go in and actually close them out. The due date in that case doesn't matter to me. And then the task owner can either be the current user, so the person creating the duplicate, or the master record owner, whoever owns the merge target. Or you don't have to do the task at all. You can uncheck that. Okay. So I'm going to edit the existing one that we have. I'm going to put a description. Can I find my description field? There it is. Description 1. And then I'm going to clone this. Now, it shouldn't look like anything's happened because we're having an auto merge run. But if I refresh this page, it says the record was deleted. And it's because that's the record I just created. It was merged into the oldest of my existing records, which happens to be this one here. And I know that because the description was overwritten with description 2. And I said, even though that's a mergeable field, overwrite it with the new incoming stuff. And that's what it did. You can also see in the account history, if you have that turned on, that it was merged. Okay. So that's auto merging. You guys have been kind of quiet, and I'm sorry. I know there's been some technical glitches, so if I've confused the heck out of you, please let me know. I'll see if I can't rectify the situation before the end of the call. Okay, now before I had said I'm not a huge fan of getting those task pop-ups for my warnings, there are reports in the system that you can use. One of them is the DupeBlocker warnings by user and scenario. So rather than having warnings, tasks pop up at me, I could just have a report emailed to me so I can go in and take a look. Okay, which is nice, you know, until everybody becomes comfortable with the fact that, you know, managing duplicate warnings is part of their new job with DupeBlocker involved. Now, DupeBlocker is going to work the same for accounts, contacts, leads, just like I just showed you. If you have leads that come in from a website, though, you may want to do some special handling of those. A lot of times when leads come in from the website, they don't want the lead blocked. Even if it's a duplicate, maybe the customer or prospect is entering in some more information that's pertinent. So there's a couple options. You can either have 2 sets of scenarios, one set of lead scenarios that are just for scenarios that come in by end user entry in the user interface, or you can have web to lead scenarios also where you have a filter on both, okay? So the filter that I would use is the current user, and for the web to lead stuff, your user ID would be whoever is your default web to lead creator person. Okay, because then this knows, all right, I'm only looking at leads created by this guy, which is another way of saying leads coming from the web. And these are my scenarios for that. Your other scenarios would have a similar filter that says, and I don't know if we put it on here, but it would say, okay, either lead source does not contain web, or the current user not equal to this other person who is your default web to lead creator, however you want to handle it. The other option is, instead of having 2 sets of scenarios and using filters, you can have 1 set of scenarios, and in your DupeBlocker settings, you can use the web lead source special handling. What this is saying, and it does not look at point of origin for this lead, it's just saying if the lead is created in your Salesforce database, regardless of where it came from, and the lead source is one of these lead sources or whatever you add, then it knows if this lead is caught by a scenario set to block, don't block it, report the duplicate instead. So it saves you from having to create 2 sets of scenarios just so your web lead stuff doesn't get blocked. But if you've got some other special handling for your web leads that you need 2 sets of scenarios for, that's okay too. Okay, but just so you know what your options are. Since we're in the DupeBlocker settings, I just want to point out these other things, these other 3 that we didn't touch on, these are other customizable mapping types. The first name mapping type, the state mapping, and the country. Okay, and the first name mapping type is a nickname list. So Aggie and Agatha are seen the same. So if I enter in a contact and I put Aggie Hinkle, and then I enter in another one and I call her Agatha Hinkle, they can still be caught as a match. And the state mappings and country mappings are the same thing, but they just look at you know, the field that you choose and select for this mapping type. So I didn't want you to think I was ignoring those. The other thing we should look at are lead to account and lead to contact scenarios. Lead to contact, lead to account scenarios still function almost identically to the other ones, but it's cross objects. So there's some other things that we need to consider here. First, when you're creating the fields to match on, you have to choose the field from the lead side as well as the field from the account or contact side. In this case, it's contact. So it's not just the selection of one field. You have to do it for each object. If I turn this to do not insert, you get this option that says block account contact matches. So if you look at that little help bubble, it says normally only leads are blocked with a lead to account or lead to contact scenario. So if a lead comes in, it matches an existing contact or an existing account based on this scenario, it'll block the lead. If you turn on this checkbox though, accounts and contacts can be blocked if they match an existing lead in the system. So rather than the lead coming in matching existing account and contact, it's either the account or contact coming in matching the existing lead, and you can still have those blocked. Okay, so those are really the only things about that that are different. And you have one insert action that's different. Instead of auto merge, you have auto convert. So if it matches to, in this case, a contact, it's going to take that lead, automatically convert it into the contact. And you're presented with the same screen that you had for auto merge. You also have a conversion priority. If you want to create an opportunity, you can. And you have a converted status for your lead. And these pull from what you have in your status field for your, just your general lead status field. Okay, and it pulls all your mappings down here as well, and you can modify these if you need to. Any question on lead stuff, lead to contact, lead to account, web lead, or anything else that we've gone over? All right, well, I don't see anything coming in. We're pretty much at the end of the session now. We've talked about the settings, we've talked about warnings and the scenario detail. You see that there's some reports that come with the tool that you can use. If there's anything you have a question about, maybe something you thought it could do that I didn't mention, we still have 20 minutes. I'm more than happy to answer questions, or if you've gotten what you need, then I just want to take a minute to say thank you for joining the session. I do apologize for the technical problems. I've never had so many on a call before. I most likely will just send you a recording from an older session where things went smoothly. I don't want this to be confusing for you, and it's a lot of information to digest. If you want both, let me know. I can send you both. But otherwise, I'll send it from the one I did a couple months ago.